I'm Alina Mays, 34, and I built a company from scratch, no funding, no fanfare. For years, I supported my family quietly, editing resumes, covering rent, picking up every dropped ball. But when my brother got engaged and they introduced me like I'd never done a thing with my life, I made a choice that changed everything. Ever been overlooked by the very people you showed up for? If that hits home, share your story in the comments. You're not alone. Before I get into what happened, drop where you're watching from. And if you've ever had to draw a line after being dismissed, tap that like button and subscribe. Because what happened next caught everyone off guard. I was never the family favorite. That title belonged to Timothy before he could even spell his name. I was the middle child, too quiet to be the golden one, too responsible to be the rebellious one. Somewhere in between, I just became useful, dependable, invisible. My parents liked measurable wins, report cards, job titles, engagement rings. Timothy gave them those. I gave them stability. Growing up, I was the one who made sure the science fair project didn't catch fire, who remembered to bring extra batteries to the family camping trips. Timothy forgot things. I remembered. He flopped between hobbies and majors, guitar, computer science, culinary school, and no matter what, our parents praised his passion. When I stuck to one thing, studied hard, got decent grades, no one really noticed. At best, I was efficient. At worst, forgettable. In high school, I started picking up side gigs. Babysitting, tutoring, small freelance admin work online. I didn't make much, but I liked knowing I could cover my own expenses without asking. My dad would glance at my spreadsheets and say, "You're really organized, huh?" and then go back to whatever Timothy was saying about his band's new demo. Timothy dropped out of college after his second semester. It didn't come as a surprise. He told our parents over brunch, eyes bloodshot from another late night. I remember waiting for the fallout. But it didn't come. My mom sighed, looked disappointed for about 2 minutes, and then said, "Maybe it's just not the right environment for your creativity." They offered to help him figure out his next step. I didn't say anything. I was in my junior year of college at the time, full course load, part-time job, and still managed to send money home every few months to help with groceries or the electricity bill when things got tight. I never asked for reimbursement. It was just something I did. Someone had to. By my early 20s, I had quietly started a company, small, remote-based services for local small businesses. It wasn't glamorous. I handled administrative overflow for insurance offices, invoicing for local gyms, appointment scheduling for therapists. No startup buzz, no press coverage. Just slow, consistent growth. I kept my costs low, did most of the work myself, and reinvested everything I earned. In our family group chat, I was still the one getting tagged in funny job memes about being overworked and underpaid. Once, when I mentioned I'd landed 3 new contracts in 1 month, Timothy joked, "That's cute." "Mom, did you hear? She's becoming a local legend." Everyone laughed, including my dad. I smiled too. It was easier than correcting them. Timothy, on the other hand, pivoted into podcasting. Then YouTube. Then something with NFTs. None of it stuck. He had a talent for talking a big game, and our parents had a talent for believing it. They called him ambitious. They called me steady. He moved in with me for 4 months when his lease fell through. I didn't charge him rent. I stocked the fridge with his favorite drinks. When I mentioned I had client deadlines and needed the Wi-Fi to stay free from his gaming downloads, he told me I was too uptight. "Try being spontaneous for once," he said. "You work like you've got something to prove." I didn't say it, but I did. Every holiday, I brought something. A new tablecloth, fresh flowers, groceries, wine. Timothy brought charm. He'd make a toast, tell a few jokes, say something self-deprecating that made my parents roar with laughter. I'd be in the kitchen washing dishes while they clinked glasses. "You're such a help," my mom would say as she handed me another pan. "Timothy's got such a presence, doesn't he?" The year Timothy got engaged, I helped him plan the proposal. He asked me to vet ring styles, coordinate with the restaurant, even ghostwrite the note he slipped into the ring box. When I showed up early to help set up, he forgot to mention my name in the toast he gave that night. Couldn't have done it without my amazing fiancé and our families, he said. Everyone clapped. I smiled. I clapped too. Later that year, our parents threw an engagement dinner. Extended family, family friends, the whole crowd. I wasn't involved in planning, but I offered to chip in financially. I covered the cost of the cake and paid for the photographer quietly without asking for credit. A few days before the dinner, I booked flights for our parents as a surprise. They'd mentioned wanting to visit the venue a few days early, make a vacation out of it. I used my business card points to get them premium economy. When I told my mom, she blinked and said, "Oh wow, that's really generous of you." Then quickly added, "I hope it's not stretching your budget." It wasn't. My business was pulling in 6 figures annually at that point. I'd just hired my 3rd part-time contractor. But I said nothing. Let them assume what they wanted. I'd also booked a honeymoon suite for Timothy and his fiancée. I never told them it was from me. It was meant to be a gesture, not a statement. I thought maybe, if I kept showing up quietly, they'd notice eventually. They didn't. The week leading up to the dinner, I was fielding logistics from every direction. Aunts texting me about hotel confirmations, cousins asking about dress code, my mom calling to say she forgot to order centerpieces. I handled it. I always did. And through it all, no one asked how my business was doing. Not once. At one point, I overheard my dad tell a family friend, "Timothy's the one with the real drive. Always chasing the next big idea. Our daughter's still figuring things out. She's freelancing, I think." I wasn't freelancing. I owned a business. I had a team. I was profitable. But I didn't correct him. I just stood there with my glass of water, wondering when exactly I'd stopped being seen as an adult. At the engagement dinner, I was seated at the far end of the table, next to a cousin's boyfriend and an empty chair. Timothy and his fiancée sat center stage. My parents flanked them. There were speeches, champagne, a slideshow of Timothy and his fiancée growing up. I wasn't in a single photo. At one point, a family friend leaned over and asked, "And what do you do again, dear?" "Still in school." "No," I said calmly. "I run a business." She smiled politely. "Oh, that's nice. Good for you for keeping busy." I excused myself shortly after that and stood outside for a while, watching people filter in and out, laughing, hugging, toasting. I wasn't angry. I was tired. Tired of earning things that didn't register to anyone else. When I came back inside, they were serving dessert. Timothy's fiancée turned to me as the plates were passed around. "Hey," she said softly, "what's your last name again?" I told her. She blinked. "Wait, you're the founder of company name?" I nodded. Her mouth opened slightly. "Are you serious?" The room didn't quiet yet. That came later. But I could feel the shift. It started there. With her voice and that look in her eyes, recognition. The kind I'd been waiting for my entire life. After that dinner, I thought maybe things would shift. Just a little. Timothy's fiancée, Natalie, had clearly recognized my name. Her expression had said everything my family never had, surprise, followed by respect. But no one followed up. Not even Natalie. 2 days later, I got a message in the family group chat. My mom had sent a blurry photo of centerpieces from Pinterest and asked, "Can someone call the florist?" Timothy and I ran out of time. I called. I always did. That became the pattern. I was looped in when there was a problem to fix, a bill to pay, or a detail no one else wanted to manage. But when it came to the actual planning, the fun parts, the meaningful parts, I was excluded. Natalie had asked her 2 closest friends to be bridesmaids. Timothy had 3 groomsmen. My name never came up. No one asked if I wanted a role. Not even an honorary one. When I brought it up to my mom, gently, just to ask, she paused and said, "Well, you're not really part of that inner circle. It's more about their close friends." I nodded like that made sense. The next week, they asked if I could help build a wedding website. I designed it in 2 days, paid for the domain out of pocket, and handed over all the logins. My name wasn't listed anywhere on the site. At a brunch with extended family, Timothy started telling a story about one of my clients, completely butchered the details, but framed it like gossip. She's been doing some tech-adjacent admin thing, he said, waving a hand. Still figuring it out, I guess. Someone asked if that meant I was still freelancing. I opened my mouth to respond, but Timothy cut in. It's more like, she works from home. Lots of phone calls. She's good at the logistics stuff. My mother nodded, like that was a fair summary. I wanted to say I had just signed my 5th corporate retainer that month. That I'd hired a virtual assistant. That my revenue had doubled year over year. But I stayed quiet. That silence wasn't new. It had followed me for years. At Thanksgiving, I was the one asked to bring extra folding chairs and set the table. Timothy brought wine. My mom always acted surprised. Look at that, he brought something. When I brought up possibly hiring a PR firm to grow the business, my dad told me, don't get ahead of yourself. Slow growth is better. You don't want to risk too much. When Timothy mentioned investing in crypto, they asked him to explain the whole system. My mom took notes. They didn't mean to be dismissive. That was the hardest part. If they'd been openly cruel, I could have defended myself. But instead, it was small comments, passive nods, misplaced smiles. Enough to make me question whether I was imagining it. At one point, Timothy told a group of his friends that I was basically retired. He meant it as a joke, I think. She doesn't have a boss. Just sends a few emails in her pajamas. I'd worked 60 hours that week. At the family barbecue the following month, I was asked to pick up extra buns, bring coolers, grab the veggie platter, and coordinate arrival times. When I got there, sweaty and lugging bags, my cousin Madison was already sipping a drink by the pool. You always do the heavy lifting, she said with a smile. I didn't respond. Later that day, my dad introduced Timothy to one of his coworkers as the ambitious one. I was standing right there. He's got that hustle gene, he said proudly. Always dreaming big. Then he glanced at me. And she's steady. She likes security. Keeps things simple. I hadn't felt secure in years. I'd bootstrapped a business with no investors, no safety net, no backup plan. Every month was a negotiation between expansion and risk. But to them, I was playing it safe. Timothy announced the wedding venue in a group video call. I found out at the same time as our distant relatives. My mom had helped pick it. I hadn't even known they were touring places. After the call, Natalie sent me a message. Hey, can you help put together the itinerary for the bridal party weekend? My maid of honor is super disorganized. I said yes. I always said yes. Even when they forgot to loop me in. Even when I paid the deposits no one remembered. Even when I found out I wasn't invited to the menu tasting. It's mostly just couples, my mom explained when I asked. You wouldn't have had much fun anyway. That same week, Timothy's groomsmen group started a private chat. I only knew because he mentioned a joke from it in passing. Inside joke. Never mind, he said, smirking. I was always on the outside of those jokes. Natalie had once asked me if I thought Timothy had changed in the past few years. I didn't know how to answer. He hadn't really changed. He had just become more comfortable seeing me as support staff. The dynamic wasn't new, it had just deepened. He had always taken up space without asking. And I had always stepped aside. There was a weekend where my dad needed help with his taxes. Timothy was busy, so they called me. I sorted everything. Stayed up late running calculations. Sent them a detailed PDF. They never thanked me. But when Timothy brought over dinner the next night, my mom said, he's so thoughtful. Always thinking of others. I didn't say anything. By the time we hit the 3-month countdown to the wedding, I'd paid for the calligraphy signage, handled the RSVPs, and rebooked the DJ after the original one canceled. No one mentioned it in the family newsletter my aunt sent out. She's just always good in a crisis, my mom said when someone brought it up. Our dependable one. I was starting to realize dependable was just code for invisible. The week before the rehearsal dinner, I overheard my dad on the phone with someone, maybe a client, maybe a relative. He was talking about Timothy's big potential. He's got real vision, he said. The kind of guy who's going places. Our daughter? She's more grounded. Simple lifestyle. Kind of stays behind the scenes. I had 2 contractors, 6 active clients, and had just been asked to consult for a regional business accelerator. Behind the scenes? Maybe. But not small. Still, I said nothing. Because when you've spent years being minimized by the people closest to you, it takes a long time to start believing you're more than what they see. What I didn't realize was that Natalie, of all people, was starting to see it. And soon, the room would stop laughing. And Timothy wouldn't know what to say. A week before the engagement dinner, I stopped by my parents' house to drop off a few last-minute items for the event. My mom was in the kitchen, folding cloth napkins. She barely looked up when I walked in. "Just leave everything on the counter," she said, before returning to her speakerphone conversation with Aunt Mara. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. I was just setting down the boxes, checking the catering invoice. But then I heard it. "Well, Timothy's our success story," my mother said, in that polished, performative tone she used when she thought someone important was listening. "Our daughter's still trying different projects. We hope she settles soon." There was a pause, then laughter, hers and Mara's. Not mean-spirited, just amused. As if I were a teenager still bouncing between hobbies instead of running a profitable business. I didn't say anything. I didn't slam anything or storm out. I just left. Quietly. I didn't bring it up at the dinner. There wasn't any point. Instead, I showed up early with a small gift for Natalie, a framed print of one of their engagement photos I'd had custom matted. She thanked me politely, said she loved it, then handed it off to someone else to pack away. The restaurant was elegant. Long table, white tablecloths, gold accents, string quartet in the corner. I had helped confirm the rental contract and called to fix a last-minute seating error that morning. But when I arrived, there was no place card with my name. I waited a few minutes before quietly pulling out a chair at the end of the table. I wasn't surprised. At this point, I expected to be forgotten. As guests arrived, I stayed out of the way, helped pass drinks, collected jackets. Timothy came in late, laughing loudly, holding Natalie's hand like a trophy. Our parents beamed. Dad slapped him on the back. "There's our man." No one looked in my direction. I was wearing a navy wrap dress I'd bought 2 years earlier. Not flashy, not expensive, just clean, fitted, safe. I watched as people hugged and reconnected. Old family friends, distant cousins, former neighbors. There were toasts and photo ops and compliments about Timothy's tie. At one point, a man I vaguely recognized asked if I was one of Natalie's coworkers. I said no. He nodded, not waiting for clarification, and turned away. Dinner was served. Chicken or salmon. White wine. Small talk. Laughter that felt choreographed. I picked at my food and listened. Natalie was describing her new job, project manager at a tech consulting firm downtown. She listed her client accounts, her team size, her commute. I sipped water and nodded in the right places. No one asked what I did. That had become normal. Then it happened. Somewhere between the entree and dessert, Natalie turned to me. She had leaned in to ask a question about her seating chart for the wedding and hesitated. "Wait, what's your last name again?" I told her. She paused. Really looked at me. "Wait, you're the founder of company name?" The clinking of silverware stopped. Not all at once, but gradually. Enough that I felt it. Heard it. My father's fork froze midair. My mother's smile faltered. Timothy blinked. Natalie didn't notice. She was too focused on me now. "I use your platform at work," she said, almost laughing. "Are you serious?" "Everyone on my team does. We've been integrating it with our scheduling tools for months." I nodded once. "That's us." There was a beat of silence. A few people shifted in their seats. Someone coughed. My dad reached for his wine glass, but missed the stem on the first try. Natalie glanced around, suddenly aware that she'd stepped into something. But she didn't backpedal. "That's really impressive," she said. "I had no idea. You've built something amazing." No one else said a word. Not my mom. Not Timothy. Not anyone at the table who'd ever referred to me as still finding my way. I didn't follow up. I didn't elaborate. I just folded my napkin and took another bite of my chicken, which had gone cold. Natalie tried to fill the space. "We're actually expanding use of the tool company-wide. It's saved us hours. I wish I'd known you were behind it. I would have reached out." I thanked her quietly. Then I turned the conversation back to the table. I think dessert is coming soon. A waiter had started circulating with creme brulee. I nodded to the tray. People jumped on the queue. Someone made a joke about calories. My mom asked about the playlist. The moment passed. Kind of. But not for Timothy. He spent the rest of the meal quieter than usual. Didn't finish his wine. When I congratulated him again before leaving, he looked at me like he didn't quite know who I was. Later that night, I got a message from Natalie. Hey, I hope that wasn't weird. I just didn't expect that. What you've built is incredible. I wrote back, not weird. Just new information. She didn't respond. She didn't need to. The next morning, my dad forwarded me a link to a Forbes article about small business growth strategies. No subject line. No message. Just the link. My mom called later to check in. She asked if I needed help getting ready for the wedding weekend. I told her everything was already handled. I'd done the work weeks ago. She hesitated. That's great. Then added, I think Timothy's just a little overwhelmed right now. The spotlight's on him. Big transitions. I said nothing. She kept going. He's always been the performer. You've always been more under the radar. I waited. You should talk to him, she finished. Let him know there's no competition. There hadn't been. Not from my end. But I was starting to realize how hard it must be to stay the center of attention when someone else walks in with their own light. I didn't reach out to Timothy. I didn't offer comfort or clarification. For once, I let him sit in the discomfort of realizing I wasn't what he thought. I never had been. I was just the one they didn't bother to see. Until they had to. That night after the engagement dinner, my phone didn't stop buzzing. First it was my mom. Why didn't you tell us how well things were going? As if she'd ever asked. Then my aunt. Saw you at dinner, Natalie was raving. So proud of you. I hadn't spoken to her in 6 months. Even Timothy sent a message. Didn't know the company had grown like that. Cool stuff. Cool stuff. Like I'd shown him a new pair of sneakers. The messages kept coming. Old friends. Distant cousins. A few people I hadn't heard from since college. All variations of the same theme: congratulations, admiration, curiosity. As if one name drop had suddenly rearranged how they saw me. I didn't respond to most of them. There wasn't anything to say. I sat on the edge of my bed with the screen glowing in my lap, reading and rereading every message, and I didn't feel satisfaction. Not even a flicker. Just tired. Tired of how quickly interest showed up the moment my work became visible. Tired of being ignored for years and then treated like a sudden discovery. I thought about all the times they'd dismissed me. The holiday dinners where Timothy's improv shows were talked about for hours while no one asked how my business was doing. The birthdays where my gifts were practical, expected, taken for granted. The conversations I wasn't part of. The assumptions that I was struggling. The way my wins were either minimized or repackaged as luck. It would have been easy to call it resentment. But it wasn't that. Not anymore. It was clarity. They hadn't just overlooked me. They'd needed me to stay small. It made things simpler. Easier to praise Timothy when there was no comparison. Easier to assign roles. He was the star, I was the helper. The framework worked as long as I didn't interrupt it. Now that I had, they didn't know what to do. The next morning, I called Ava, my mentor. She picked up on the second ring. Didn't expect to hear from you this early, she said. I want to talk about scaling, I replied. We're ready to bring in someone for ops. She didn't ask what had prompted the shift. Just opened her calendar. We talked for an hour. About onboarding. Hiring timelines. Creating systems that could run without me in the weeds. I didn't mention the dinner. Didn't bring up the awkward pause, or Natalie's surprise, or the look on my father's face when he realized who I was. It didn't matter. Ava knew what I was capable of. She always had. After the call, I opened my laptop and updated the job description I'd been drafting for months, but never posted. Director of Operations. Part-time to start. Remote. It was time to stop treating the business like a temporary project. It wasn't a side hustle. It hadn't been for years. I just hadn't allowed myself to own that fully. Later that afternoon, I met with my team over Zoom. 3 contractors. All women. all brilliant in ways that deserved more investment. I told them we'd be expanding, that their roles could grow too, that I wanted them to start thinking long-term. They asked thoughtful questions, took notes, smiled. Not one of them asked why now. The truth was, something had shifted inside me at that dinner. Not because of Natalie's recognition, but because of what came after. The silence, the scramble, the sudden realization, in everyone else's eyes, that I had value. Not because they'd discovered something new about me, but because they'd finally looked. And I realized I didn't need them to. They could catch up, or they could stay where they were. It wasn't my job to bridge the gap anymore. That weekend, I drove out to the lake to see Kara, my old roommate from college and one of the few people who had followed my business from the beginning. We sat on her porch with tea, watching the water. I told her everything. She didn't interrupt. When I finished, she said, "They're going to act like they've always supported you. You know that, right?" I nodded. "And you're going to have to decide, do you let them rewrite the story, or do you hold the line?" I thought about it for a long moment. "I'm not correcting them," I said finally. "But I'm not playing along either." She raised her glass. "That's the line." On Sunday, my dad sent another article. This one about business-to-business software. No message. I didn't reply. My mom called and asked if I was free for lunch sometime next week. Said she wanted to catch up properly. I told her I'd check my schedule. The truth was, I didn't know yet what kind of relationship I wanted with them going forward. I wasn't interested in punishing them. But I also wasn't interested in smoothing things over just because they'd finally noticed what I'd built. They didn't get to skip the work. Recognition isn't the same as respect. And they'd shown me for years where I stood. Now they could sit with that. I spent the rest of the weekend drafting content for the company blog, reviewing contracts, cleaning up the onboarding workflow. By Monday morning, I had a short list of candidates for the new hire. By Wednesday, I'd posted the position publicly. I updated my LinkedIn, cleaned up my bio, submitted a speaker application for a mid-sized business conference in the fall. It felt like spring cleaning, except the thing I was clearing out was smallness. No more hiding. No more playing modest just to keep others comfortable. No more helping quietly while being mistaken for the intern. That Friday, I got a package in the mail. Natalie had sent a thank you card and a small gift box, artisan chocolates, a candle, and a handwritten note. "Thank you for everything you've done for the engagement. And also for the company. You've built something real." I'm in awe. There was no smiley face. No girl boss sticker. Just those words. Clear. Honest. Real. I placed the card on my desk. Not because I needed validation, but because it reminded me that sometimes recognition comes from unexpected places. And it doesn't have to come loudly to mean something. That night, I opened a bottle of wine and sat on the floor with my laptop, building out the company's new org chart. For the first time, I didn't think about what anyone in my family would think of it. This wasn't for them. It never had been. A few weeks after the dinner, I got a text from my mom. "We're thinking of doing a brunch the day after the wedding for the out-of-town guests. Would you want to host it at your place? Show them what you've built." There was no malice in it. That was the hardest part. She meant it as a compliment. As an opportunity. As if I'd been waiting for my moment in the spotlight, and now they were finally offering me one. But I wasn't interested in being offered anything. I read the message twice, then typed out a response. "Thanks for thinking of me, but I'll pass. I've got a full calendar that weekend." I didn't add anything else. No softened language. No false apology. She replied with a thumbs-up emoji and nothing more. The next day, Timothy called. I let it go to voicemail. His message was calm, but the tension was obvious. "Hey, Mom said you don't want to do the brunch thing. Totally your call. I don't know. You've been kind of distant lately. We didn't mean to make you feel excluded or anything. I think everyone's just been stressed." I didn't call back. I texted instead. "You didn't mean to exclude me. You just didn't notice you were doing it." "That's different." No response. Over the next week, I pulled back from everything. No RSVP coordination. No vendor follow-up. I didn't remind anyone to confirm catering or check hotel blocks. The silence was loud. Natalie messaged once to ask if I could send over the contact info for the printer. I did. Nothing more. No, let me know if you need anything. No emojis. Just the number. It felt strange at first, the not helping. Like sitting on my hands while something tilted slightly off balance. But it also felt necessary. The dynamic had always relied on me stepping in. Quietly. Consistently. Automatically. So when I didn't, it created a vacuum. My mom called 2 days later. I just realized we forgot to finalize the shuttle pickup times, she said, sounding rushed. Do you still have that spreadsheet you used? I do, I said. She waited. Would you mind forwarding it? I'd prefer not to be involved anymore, I said, keeping my voice even. I think it's best if I step back. A pause. Oh. Well, if that's what you want. It is. She hung up without saying goodbye. The next day, I got a package from Natalie. A gift box labeled Bridesmaid Proposal. Inside was a handwritten note. I should have asked you earlier. I'm sorry I didn't. I know this isn't traditional, but if you'd still want to stand with me, I'd be honored. It was a thoughtful gesture. One she didn't have to make. But I didn't say yes. I called her and explained. Calmly. Kindly. I appreciate it. Really. But I think I need to sit this one out. I've spent a long time standing in the background. I'd rather not be in any position where I feel like I'm doing that again. She didn't argue. She just said, I understand. And I believed her. 2 nights later, Timothy called again. This time I picked up. I feel like you're punishing everyone, he said. I'm not. It kind of feels that way. Like you've made some big decision and now you're just icing people out. I'm not punishing anyone, I repeated. I'm just not pretending anymore. He exhaled sharply. Look, I get it. Okay. You felt overlooked. But I don't think anyone did it on purpose. We've all had a lot going on. I waited. Let the silence stretch. You didn't ask, I said finally. Not once. Not about the business. Not about my life. You assumed. And you built a whole version of me based on convenience. That's not fair. It's accurate. He didn't respond right away. After a long pause, he said, you could have said something sooner. I did. Just not in words. Timothy wasn't used to not being forgiven immediately. He wasn't used to discomfort. I could hear it in the way he kept trying to spin the situation into something fixable. Something smaller. Mom's freaking out, he added. She thinks you're going to skip the wedding entirely. I'm not, I said. I'll be there. Okay, good. But I won't be working it. I won't be fixing things last minute or showing up early to carry folding chairs. Another pause. Okay. I don't think he liked it. But he heard it. That was enough. The week before the wedding, I kept to myself. Focused on onboarding our new operations lead. Finalized a new client proposal. Put in extra time with the team. The business was moving forward. With or without their understanding. The morning of the rehearsal, I arrived on time. No earlier. I sat where I was assigned. I made polite conversation. At one point, I heard my mom telling a family friend about the business. She stumbled through the description, got the name slightly wrong, couldn't explain what we did. She's always been very independent, she said, with a tight smile. Never liked a lot of fuss. I walked away. Not because it hurt. It didn't. Not anymore. But because I didn't need to correct the story. I'd already written a new one. At the rehearsal dinner, Timothy pulled me aside. I don't know if this is the right time, he said, shifting awkwardly, but I want to say I was wrong. About a lot of things. About you. I let him sit in the discomfort a moment longer. Thanks, I said. That's all. It's enough, I replied. He didn't know what to do with that. But he nodded. The next day, I got dressed slowly. Wore a slate blue dress that I liked. Simple. Clean lines. No one had picked it out for me. I showed up on time. Sat in my assigned seat. Smiled when appropriate. Posed for photos when asked. And when people asked what I did, I answered. Clearly. Calmly. No self-deprecation. I run a business, I said. We support small and mid-sized teams with operational workflows. We've doubled our revenue this year. Some nodded politely. Some looked surprised. One guest, a partner at a tech firm, asked if I'd ever considered licensing. I handed him a card. When I left the reception that night, no one asked me to help with cleanup. No one handed me a box or a clipboard. I didn't wait around for thanks. I'd stopped asking for permission to be taken seriously. And once I did, the rest took care of itself. The wedding came and went. It was beautiful in the way most well-funded events are, polished, symmetrical, staged. The flowers were perfect. The weather cooperated. The band stayed on rhythm. But underneath the polished surface, things slipped. The shuttles arrived 30 minutes late to pick up the grandparents. The officiant brought the wrong version of the vows. A vendor delivered mismatched linens, ivory instead of cream, and Natalie looked like she might cry when she saw them. I noticed it all. Every off-script moment. Every tiny lapse. And I said nothing. Not out of malice. Just a decision. No one had asked me to fix anything. So I didn't. After the ceremony, I stood near the edge of the lawn, sipping a glass of champagne as people milled around taking photos. My mom rushed past me at one point, looking frazzled. "Did you see where the backup candles went?" she asked. I shook my head. She gave me a tight smile, like she'd forgotten who she was talking to, and kept moving. By the time the reception started, the caterers had mixed up the dietary tags on the place cards. 3 guests with allergies got the wrong meals. The staff corrected it eventually, but the ripple was obvious. A few years ago, I would have been the one triple-checking those details, flagging issues before they became problems. Now I just watched. Not with satisfaction. Not with cruelty. Just distance. They weren't bad people. My family just invested in a version of me that had served them well. And that version, quiet, helpful, conveniently modest, no longer existed. A week later, I received an email from a consulting firm I'd been pitching for months. They wanted to move forward. It wasn't just a client, it was a name brand, a referral pipeline, and a long-term retainer. The firm? Natalie's employer. We'd crossed paths once in a strategy call. She kept it professional. But after the meeting, she sent a quick message. "I told them we'd be lucky to work with you." Glad they listened. That month, I also finalized hiring for our operations role and began onboarding a second project manager. Revenue was up 40% from the previous quarter. I was working fewer hours. But the impact stretched farther. A colleague invited me to speak on a panel, Women Building Infrastructure Behind the Scenes. It was one of those events where the audience actually listens. No performative clapping. Just people scribbling notes, nodding, asking smart questions. I spoke about systems, delegation, scale. I didn't mention my family. I didn't need to. The event was recorded and posted online. A clip circulated on LinkedIn. I saw the notifications roll in, likes, shares, a few comments. Then I saw my dad's name. He'd liked the post. No comment. No message. Just a silent tap of acknowledgement, visible to anyone who cared to check. I didn't respond. The silence between us had become a kind of agreement. I wasn't angry. I was uninterested in pretending we were something we weren't. 2 weeks later, my mom called. "Your father saw your talk," she said. "He thought you sounded different." "I am," I said. She paused, then asked if I'd be willing to come by for dinner. Just us. No expectations. I agreed, partly out of curiosity. When I arrived, the table was already set. There was wine. Cloth napkins. My dad asked if I wanted sparkling water or still. It felt rehearsed. We made small talk, traffic, weather, someone's retirement. Then my mom said, "We didn't realize how much you'd built." I didn't reply. My dad added, "It's impressive." Still, I said nothing. Not to punish them, but because I wanted to see what they'd do with the silence. Eventually, my mom asked, "Why didn't you ever tell us?" I looked up. "You didn't ask." She opened her mouth to respond, then closed it. I wasn't there to rehash old wounds. So I changed the subject. We ate. We exchanged neutral stories. I left early. On the drive home, I didn't feel triumphant. Just relieved. There was nothing left to prove. That same week, my team completed a major platform update ahead of schedule. Our customer retention rate ticked upward. The feedback was positive. Grateful even. One client sent a handwritten note. "You've changed how we operate. We can breathe again." I taped it above my desk. That Friday, I met Kara again at the lake. We walked the same path as before. She asked how the wedding had gone, and I told her briefly. "Anything blow up?" she asked. "Only the flower budget," I said. She laughed. "And how's post-wedding life?" "Quiet. Busy. Better." We sat for a while in silence. Then she asked, "Do you miss them? The way things used to be?" I thought about it. "No," I said. "I miss who I pretended to be." She made things easier. For everyone else. But not for you. No, later that night, I sent a note to my team thanking them for hitting our Q3 goals. I meant it. They'd believed in the work even when it wasn't flashy. Even when it wasn't obvious. I told them that too. Some people notice your value after you've proven it. Others see it the whole way through. I don't take that for granted. One of them replied, "We see you. Always have." It was the kind of sentence that lands quietly and stays with you. That weekend, I received a wedding thank you card in the mail. From Timothy and Natalie. No gift list. No long message. Just, "Thanks for being there. For everything, past and present." I folded it in half and placed it in the drawer. Not because it meant the world, but because it meant they were still trying to catch up. And I was okay with that. Some lessons take time. Some boundaries take longer to be respected than to be set. And some stories take years to rewrite, especially when you've lived them one silent compromise at a time. But I had time. And I wasn't silent anymore. It was almost 6 months later when I heard from Natalie again. She sent a short email. No emojis. No small talk. Subject line, "Coffee?" Text, "I've been thinking about that night at the dinner. You said very little, but it stayed with me. You didn't need to prove anything, you just let it land. I admire that. If you ever have time for coffee, I'd love to hear more about how you built what you did. No pressure, no family stuff. Just two professionals." I stared at the message for a moment, then smiled. I said yes. We met at a cafe near her office, neutral, quiet, well-lit. She arrived on time, holding her phone in one hand, her coat folded over the other arm. She looked different. Not in any obvious way. Just sharper. More grounded. We ordered. Sat down. And for the first 20 minutes, we didn't mention family at all. She asked thoughtful questions. About hiring, funding, scaling. About why I'd chosen to grow slowly, without outside investment. I answered honestly. She listened. Not politely, actively. At one point she paused and said, "You know, I used to think visibility equaled success. That if people weren't talking about it, it didn't count." I nodded. I get now that some of the best work happens under the radar. But it doesn't make it any less real. It wasn't a compliment. It was a reflection. And it told me she'd been paying attention. When we stood to leave, she said, "Thanks for saying yes. I wasn't sure you would." "I appreciated how you reached out," I said. "You made it easy to say yes." She smiled. "Good. That was the goal." A week later, Timothy called. I didn't pick up the first time. Or the second. On the third, I answered. He sounded nervous. "Hey, I talked to Natalie. She mentioned you two met up." "We did," I said. "That's good." There was a pause. Then, I wanted to say something. And I've been sitting on it for a while, trying to figure out the right way. I waited. I think I've been carrying this idea that I worked harder. Or wanted it more. But that's not true. It was just easier for people to see what I was doing. And harder to see you. Because you never made it about you. I didn't say anything. He kept going. "You were the one who edited my cover letters. Who fixed Mom's tax forms. Who found the venue for the dinner when the first one fell through. And I just assumed you'd always be there. Like it was your job to make everything easier for the rest of us." Still, I didn't respond. "Anyway, I'm sorry," he said. "I don't expect anything back. I just wanted to say that out loud." I let the silence hang for a beat. Then, "Thanks." It wasn't a long conversation. He didn't try to justify anything. And I didn't offer reassurance. It wasn't dramatic. It was just real. And that made it matter more. In the weeks that followed, things shifted, not dramatically, but noticeably. Timothy sent me an article about scaling distributed teams. Asked for my take. My mom forwarded a message from one of her friends whose daughter was starting a small business and asked if I'd be open to connecting. Even my dad, who'd said the least throughout this whole shift, sent a quick text after I appeared on another panel. Nice talk. Good points. 3 words. But from him, it felt like a paragraph. I didn't rush to repair anything. I didn't show up at their house with a fresh tray of cookies or offer to host the next birthday dinner. But I didn't shut the door either. Trust, once broken, doesn't get rebuilt with apologies alone. It's in the consistency that follows. And slowly, I started seeing that consistency. Natalie invited me to a networking event her firm was sponsoring. Introduced me, not as Timothy's sister, but by name and by title. Timothy came to one of my team's live demos. He sat in the back, took notes, asked one smart question, and left without making it about him. Even my mom, who had always led with performative pride, shifted her language. She stopped calling it your little business. She started asking real questions about pricing, about customer acquisition, about margins. I didn't answer all of them, but I answered enough to let her know I noticed the effort. The relationship didn't go back to what it was. It evolved into something else. Less caretaking, more boundaries, and more space for me to show up as myself, not the role they were used to. One afternoon, Natalie and I had lunch after a client check-in. We talked about hiring challenges, about burnout, about being taken seriously in rooms where we weren't expected to lead. At one point, she said, I think you showing up the way you did, quiet, composed, clear, it taught me more than any leadership book I've read. I didn't deflect. I just said, thanks. Later that night, I looked through some old photos. Family vacations, holidays, reunions. I could see it clearly now, me, always slightly out of frame. Hands full, arms extended, managing things while everyone else posed. I wasn't angry, just aware. And I wasn't interested in editing the past. But I was making sure the future looked different. That started with me. Not proving anything. Not asking for credit. Just living fully in my own story and letting others do the work of earning their place in it. That was enough. And for the first time in a long time, it felt like enough was finally the right amount. It's been over a year. The company's stable, profitable, quietly respected in the circles that matter. I hired a COO last fall, someone with deep operational experience and zero ego. She runs the day-to-day now. I check in once a week, mostly to strategize. I still make the final calls, but I'm not in the weeds anymore. I don't have to be. The team's grown too. 12 people now, spanning 3 time zones. We built a rhythm, a cadence. We know when to push and when to pause. And I've learned how to let go without disappearing. There's a strange kind of peace in watching something you built run well without your constant intervention. It's not absence. It's trust. At family gatherings now, they ask about work. Not in that vaguely performative, smile too wide way they used to. They ask real questions. Specific ones. How's the new hire working out? Did that licensing deal go through? Are you still speaking at that conference in Chicago? Sometimes I answer. Briefly. Clearly. Then I pivot. I don't need the room to orbit around me. I just need it not to shrink me. Timothy and I are fine. We're not especially close, but we don't avoid each other either. There's respect now or something close to it. Once in a while he'll send me a podcast or an article and say, "This reminded me of what you said about scaling." It's not performative, just thoughtful. Natalie checks in every now and then. We've co-hosted 2 panels together. She has a good eye for audience energy, and she's learned how to yield the mic when it matters. I appreciate that. My parents are trying. I think that's the best way I can put it. There are still moments where the old patterns creep in, a comment that schemes too close to passive-aggressive, or a conversation that centers Timothy without realizing it. But they catch themselves more often now. At Thanksgiving, my mom introduced me to a neighbor as our daughter who runs a company. Just that. No qualifiers. No, finally found her thing. No, you'd never guess. Just the sentence. I let it land and moved on. The truth is, I don't need them to rewrite history. I just need them to stop erasing mine. There was a moment, about 6 months ago, when we were all at my parents' house for a birthday. My dad was telling a story, one of those long, winding ones that he gets too wrapped up in to edit, and he said something that stuck. He was talking about a childhood trip we took. That summer, everything was held together by duct tape and your sister, he said to Timothy, gesturing at me. She kept the whole thing from falling apart. And I saw it, briefly, on his face, this flicker of recognition. Not just of who I am now, but of who I'd been all along. He didn't say anything else. Just sipped his coffee and kept going. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. That's been the biggest shift. I no longer need my value to be spoken aloud to believe it exists. I no longer chase clarity from people who benefit from confusion. I just live in the clarity I built myself. Sometimes I'm introduced now as the successful one. At weddings. At alumni events. At networking mixers where someone connects the dots and suddenly I'm a name they've heard before. I let it pass. Because success, for me, didn't come from proving them wrong. It came from refusing to let them define me in the first place. It came from staying the course when no one was watching. From building slowly, without applause. From believing in something long enough that eventually, it didn't matter who believed with me. That's what stuck. Not the recognition. Not the LinkedIn post likes. Not the keynote invitations. But the knowledge that I didn't need a spotlight to be worth seeing. And now, on the rare days I catch my reflection and think about how far I've come, I don't feel pride in the loud sense. I feel steadiness. Like I became someone I can trust. Like I showed up for myself enough times that it became a habit. There's a kind of legacy in that. Not the kind that gets written about, but the kind that lives in how you carry yourself. How you set the tone in a room without raising your voice. How you teach people how to treat you without ever making a speech about it. A quiet legacy, but a real one. And it's enough. Thanks for watching. Have you ever been the one they underestimated until you stopped explaining yourself? What did setting that boundary cost you, and what did it give back? Drop your story in the comments. I read every one. And if this hit home, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more true stories about choosing self-respect over approval. See you in the next one.